When I was a kid, my family took a road trip to Zion National Park. Our campsite was just outside of the park next to this lovely little creek. In the heat of the afternoon, my sister and I would play in the shallow creek, hopping around from rock to rock. At one point, the water suddenly seemed to get muddier, and our parents quickly called us up out of the creek. It wasn't long before the once gentle creek suddenly grew into a churning, muddy mass of water roaring down the creek bed and carrying large logs and all manner of debris. What my sister and I didn't know was that just hours earlier while we were playing in the creek, conditions upstream were aligning to trigger a dangerous flash flood. Growing up, I actually thought about floods a decent bit. Being a child named Noah in a largely Christian community meant that I had heard the Bible story of the flood many times. I imagine even if you're not Christian or Jewish, you might have heard the story too. And even if you're not a Christian or Jew, I think there's still something interesting here to think about. Anyway, here's a quick synopsis for if you're unfamiliar with the story. So, after God created humanity, they turned on him by deciding that they knew better when it came to distinguishing between good and bad. So, humanity was sent away from God's presence, and they grew into larger communities. Now, these communities became increasingly broken. People proudly proclaimed killing others who crossed them. It got so bad that God regretted even making humans in the first place. So he decided to completely wipe them out. Except, there was this one person who wasn't participating in the wickedness of his time, Noah. So God saved Noah and his family by forewarning them of a dangerous flood that would come and wipe out the rest of humanity. So Noah built a boat, saving him, his family, and his species. After the flood, God promised never again to wipe out humanity in that way. Throughout my life, I've had a complicated relationship with this story. First off, as a scientist, I knew that there just wasn't evidence of a massive flood covering the earth and wiping everything out. However, the question of how literally to interpret the flood story isn't essential to me. What had seemed more troubling was the apparently genocidal tendencies of the creator God. Now, over time, I've become more comfortable with the story. First off, if I read the story generously, I should take the author at face value when they say that the human heart was only evil all the time. If that's the case, then it seems like those civilizations may well have deserved to be destroyed. And on a broader level, if that humanity truly seemed unredeemable, perhaps the most merciful thing to do would be to put an end to it, instead of letting the violence and pain and evil go on perpetually. And the most comforting thing is that the story of the flood is in the first few pages of the Bible. The rest of the biblical story is about a God who decides to work to redeem humanity, even when all evidence points to them being unredeemable. Now, as a 20-something in 21st century America, I sometimes feel like I'm living in a moment right before a flood, where the river has started to run muddy, but the water has yet to rise. Perhaps this isn't unique to my generation. Maybe it's just part of the human condition to feel like something is coming. But every day I'm bombarded by a flood of information from YouTube, Instagram, podcasts, and news articles, all vying for my attention, my clicks. Say what you will about the social internet, but for better or worse, it's a flood of everything all of the time. This kind of information overload is something that past generations just haven't had to deal with. Politically, the people in my country seem to be at each other's throats. Sometimes in good faith, but more and more often it seems that we just want to be able to proudly proclaim that we beat those who cross us. And that's just the United States. It so often seems that there are very few people who act as if we ought to care for all our fellow humans, our siblings next door and around the world. Especially those with comfortable lives, people like me, seem to neglect our brothers and sisters even when their hunger, their pain, and their blood cry out. Most literally, I feel like a flood is imminent when I think of the ecological damage our species has done. Due to our flooding the atmosphere with greenhouse gases, climate change is bringing with it more frequent and severe flooding. Flooding and sea level rise will be disastrous to human communities and to natural ecosystems. Climate change will also bring heat waves and drought to some areas, but those are less metaphorically resonant to compare to a flood. And that's just the tip of the all too quickly melting iceberg when it comes to humans' disregard for creation. The impact we have on our planet is profound. We've killed countless species and will kill countless more, inevitably hurting future and fellow humans along the way. In the Bible, before the flood story, God told humanity to rule over all the other creatures of the earth. And it certainly seems like we've become rulers over creation. But in too many ways, we are mad, selfish kings, drunk with our own power, while not realizing that we are not nearly as powerful or benevolent as we think we are. To the rest of creation, we must look like one dangerous flood. When my sister and I experienced that flash flood outside of Zion, we were kept safe by listening to our parents' warning, trusting their judgment, and doing what they said. The Noah of the Bible was also saved by trusting the judgment of his father and by following his instructions. In some form or another, we all experience floods. Whether personally, as part of a group, or even as a whole species, floods are going to happen. Whether we contribute to them and how we respond to them is up to us. My flood is the overwhelming streams of information that tell me I need to worry about my needs, my rights, and my life over the lives of others. My flood is the broken aspects of my culture that seed division and choke out community. My flood is the fact that we've already signed up for some, but not all, of the disastrous impacts of climate change. That every day I participate in systems that abuse humans and abuse nature. In all of these floods, I'm both a victim and a perpetrator. I'm a kid in a muddy creek, but I'm also upstream participating in the systems that make that creek more likely to flood. I want out of these floods. Like the Noah of the Bible, I think that there are concrete things I can do about it. Maybe not building a boat, but helping to build loving communities would be a good start. But also like the Noah of the Bible and my younger self in that muddy creek, I can't see the way out on my own. For me, I aspire to seek direction from the same person as the Noah of the Bible, God. That might not be where you get your direction, and that's your choice, but I think that everyone should examine how the ideas and people they look to for direction respond to floods.